Okay, so what was the very first thought you had that sparked your idea about wanting to write a book?
The first thought I had well, I've written two books. One is on photographic exposure, like shutter speeds and apertures, and using all your camera functions for exposure. My recent book is on nature photography, and it's always been a love of mine. And so I didn't start off being a writer, I started off being a photographer, but I always collected lots of information about my photos. And so when I was asked by Random House to write a book on nature photography, it was one of my first loves, and I was very excited about it. And so I got commissioned to do the book, and that's how that started to do uh, this most recent book called The Complete Guide to Nature Photography.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you just recently learned to love writing, or did you like it for your whole life?
I have never been a writer. I
That's
didn't
awesome.
I didn't think of my talents as lying in writing. So I tell people all the time, I'm no Hemingway, I'm no John Steinbeck. I'm not a writer, and I was asked a lot in the '90s to write, but writing is a huge job in its own, similar to photography. And because photography was so much work to photograph a location, I didn't want to do both, and I didn't find myself being confident in writing. But then I started to write maybe 10, 12, 13 years ago. I began writing for myself, but slowly started to write articles for magazines, and that's when I gained my confidence into writing a little bit more.
Cool. Okay. So what is your writing process like? Do you need to do anything before you write? Do you just spend a lot of time brainstorming? Stuff like
I do. It depends on the project.
that?
If the project was a book, it's a huge undertaking, and it takes. Luckily, I'm given about 7, 8, 9 months to write it. So what I usually do, I think all writers, and same like all photographers, all writers work differently. But what I like to do is gather the information first. If I'm writing an article that's shorter, 1,500 words, 2,000 words, it's a little different. I'll think about the concept, about what I'm writing about, and I'll build upon that. A book is 55,000 or 60,000 words. And the book I was writing is a how-to book, so it's very You have to be very organized because I want to write a book, but I want to write it in a step-by-step process. So that's a lot of thought goes into. So I'll jot down little notes for about 2 months. I'll put notes. I'll take big sections of things I want to write about, and I'll include them in and slowly start to organize it. And for the book, I did an outline of each chapter. Outline helped me tremendously because all I have to do is once I have the outline nailed down, I put everything in, and then you could fine tune it after that.
Yep, I'm the same way.
Yeah, I love outlines.
Me too. So what about the publishing process? How was that? How'd you go about publishing your book?
Publishing is strange because it's changing these days with books becoming ebooks on the iPad and Kindle and Nook. So it's changing these days a little bit. They found me, luckily. Random House found me. There is a lot of people that self-publish these days, but I think that's so hard to do because it's great to have a staff or editors look at your work and copy edit it and then ask you, they read your work and say, I don't know what this means. Can you explain it better? And so that process, they came to me, they asked me if I wanted to do a book. We talked about a contract or how much they would pay me, what they wanted for rights. So you have to think about that. If you write a book and it becomes a Harry Potter book and you've given all your rights away, then you collect no money. So you have to be smart in business on looking at the contract and agreeing that it will work for you. And then you begin that process after you've agreed to the price and everything. So they commissioned me. We talked about what they wanted, and I made sure that their goal fit as I began to organize the book.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what was the most difficult thing you had? What was the most difficult thing you faced? Any trouble bringing it to life?
Well, I think I would imagine writing a novel or writing a story like that. I think I see myself as a short story person, really. I wrote the intro to my book, and I talked about my life and how I discovered photography, and that was really fun. That was the most creative section to me, one of the most creative sections, because I could really I could put together the story of my life in a few pages and try to describe that. The rest of my book is how-to, but you have to keep it interesting for the reader. You can't be very overly technical. You want them to have a thought process to it. So I think about those things, but I see myself as a short story writer. So when I write articles for magazines, it's easier because I can put it down in 2,000 words. The most difficult thing, you do run into writer's block, and I think the most difficult thing sometimes in writing a book is it takes so long, you get tired of it and you want to get away from it.
Yep.
And so that's one of the hardest things.
Definitely.
Another thing I can mention too, when you're writing about a topic, trying to use different words well is very important. So photography, you want to talk about image, and you want to say, "Oh, I photographed, I documented, I captured," and you want to think of different words to describe what you're doing instead of just saying, "I photographed this picture, and I photographed this scene, and I photographed that." So
Yep.
using different words, I love using a thesaurus for that reason.
I always use one. Did you do a lot of traveling? Did you have to go places to do certain things, get things checked out?
I had a lot of
Pictures?
images already in my files that I traveled all around the world with, and that helped a lot. But yes, when I wrote this book on nature photography, there were sections that I wanted to include specific examples, and so I did go off and travel a little bit to Yosemite and different places around California. And if my assignments took me out of the state, I thought about, oh, I want to photograph for my book as well and take some pictures that will show good examples of what I'm talking about. So
There you go.
yeah.
So you said you've done articles. So what other types of writing have you done besides books and articles?
I've written a few feature articles, I don't know, maybe a dozen articles on locations that I've been to, like the Florida Keys, Scotland, Argentina, Mexico, and some magazines have taken those features, which was fun to write about these locations because, again, as a photographer for so long, I saw all these, my images were my words. And I loved evolving over the past 10, 15 years into be able to describing, in words what I felt when I was photographing. So that was neat. And then I also write how-to articles for different Photoshop user magazine or outdoor photographer on how to take better photographs in different ways. I can get all technical geeky with you, but I won't.
Okay. Do you have any advice for any aspiring writers, anyone trying to get their way up there?
I was telling you earlier that I watched a documentary on the rock band, the Eagles, and recently it's on Showtime. It's a really cool documentary. They're great songwriters, and they always say that doing the work is really where you find your own vision, where you find your own voice. And writing, one of them said, if you write something, it's going to stink the first time, but if you keep writing over and over again, you'll improve. And that's what I teach my daughters. Write it, look at it again, an hour, a day, a week later, rewrite it, look at your sentences, and you'll start to find your own mistakes. The other thing is to read as many books as you can, because you'll find little tricks of the trade that they use to describe certain things that really lay out a story in just a few words. When I wrote my second book, I did not want to write longer. I wanted to write shorter, but also describe the exact same thing in less words.
Exactly.
And that's a very smart writer, and I'm not that yet, I don't think. So I'm trying to work into that.
Awesome. Overall, was it enjoyable writing, publishing, the whole thing?
It is. It's getting more enjoyable because, again, my photographs were my words, and I think so many people would tell me you should write about these locations or places you've traveled to or experiences. And I always wanted to, but I didn't see myself as a writer. I wasn't that confident. Now I'm starting to think about maybe someday trying to write a screenplay for a movie about the places I've traveled, about maybe the life of a travel photographer. And I think that would be so cool to do. And the only reason why I'm thinking about that is because I've written a number of articles and a number of books now, and I've found that confidence to be able to describe things a little bit better. And again, when you have a collaborator, when you have somebody reading your work, or you could bounce it off somebody, even if it's a publisher and they turn it down, getting any kind of feedback is great. So I work with my editors, and I listen to my clients when they say, can you change this? And I begin to think about that, and it helps me improve. So that's really what I enjoy the most, is getting better and better.
Yeah, as do I.
Yep.
Well, that about wraps up my questions.
Great. I don't think we reached 10 minutes, but we'll see.
I think we did.
Oh, we did? Okay. So let's take a look here.